everybody. Mike Philippov here. Welcome to another episode of Guitar Genius Chat. We're live here on YouTube and Facebook. So this one is about practicing acoustic guitar, something we don't usually talk about on this channel, but the principles, as you will see, the principles of practicing and technique development for acoustic guitar don't really change as they do for electric. They're pretty much the same for acoustic. And I have a very special guest with me today to help me shed some light on the mysteries and wonders of acoustic guitar playing. This guy is a very good friend of mine, very, very good guitar player, incredible guitar teacher, knows a lot of great things he's going to share with you guys today. So I'm bringing on, of course, Mr. Simon Candy. Hello, Simon. Good to have you here.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm very excited to do this today. So it's Simon. I didn't mention this. Simon, you're in Australia, so it's next day for you. I'm in America. I'm in Florida, so it's quite a big time difference.
Yeah, 8 o'clock Saturday morning here, so it's it's quite decent.
Nice. All right, Simon. So let's kick this off with a question. So let's say I am an electric guitar pick style player, which I am, and most people watching my channel typically tend to be. But let's say that I also have an interest in finger picking and acoustic guitar playing, and I want to get started. Where do I begin?
Okay, so finger picking. So I would begin with the picking hand because it's different positioning for finger picking versus flat picking or pick playing. So there's a very, very simple way to guarantee you get your hand in the right position for finger picking. And it's a real simple drill here where you get the 3 fingers of your picking hand. So for me, that's my right hand. And you place each finger in finger picking, the fingers have a letter that reference each finger. So index is I, M is M, and the ring finger is A. And these are like Spanish terms. So for the fingers, and P is thumb. So we've got P, I, M, A. Now, if we take those 3 fingers and we place them all side by side on the 3rd string, the G of the guitar, all sitting just on the string there, and then we take the thumb and we also put that on the 3rd string. So thumb and 3 fingers are all sitting on that one single string there, the 3rd string. And from there, you take your thumb without moving the 3 fingers or your hand. You just take your thumb and you place it on the bottom string. You leave your index finger where it is on the 3rd string, and you take your middle finger and you put that on the 2nd string, the B, and your ring finger goes on the top string. And if you do that, your hand will be in the perfect position to finger pick. Okay, you can't go wrong that way. So it's the 3 fingers on the 3rd string, the thumb, bring the thumb down to the bottom string, keep the index where it is, middle, 2nd string, ring finger on the top string. And when you look down from your viewpoint, you will see that your thumb and your index finger make a little bit of like an X. The fingers should be behind the thumb. If we sort of approach finger picking from a flat pick perspective, you know, the typical angle your hand is when you're flat picking, and we just then go to pluck the strings, these fingers will be out in front of the thumb, and you'll be picking at odd angles to the strings, like sort of more or less 45-degree angles with the fingers. They need to be more standing up at 90-degree angles, or thereabouts. So that is a real quick way to make sure your hand's in the right position, because that's something I see, incorrect all the time. And the thumb will naturally be sort of 45-degree angle to the string, and you want to keep that thumb nice and straight too when you're plucking. You don't want to sort of weaken it by bending the thumb as you pluck, typically, generally. So that'd be a place to start with finger picking as far as the right hand's concerned, to get that right from the beginning.
Awesome. Very good. Thanks for all that detailed information there. Actually, I was just thinking, because I was, when I started playing guitar, I started on acoustic guitar, and I did a basics of finger picking, and I was just brushing up on the things that I used to do. That when I heard you explain this, if I had known this way back when I started playing, maybe I would have stuck with finger picking a little bit more than I have, but who knows? So I understand you play some pick style guitar as well, right, Simon? You do some like actual flat picking. Okay, and I know you have experience teaching people both pick style and finger style. So my next question is, what would be some of the mistakes that you commonly see people who have experience playing with a pick, who are trying to get into finger picking? What are the mistakes they typically run into, or the challenges they run into?
Well, what I went through then would definitely be one, because if you're used to playing with a pick, you're always going to be you're going to be used to having your hand on that angle, and you're just going to probably more naturally approach it from the same angle, and you'll be all over the place. So that's definitely a big one, and that's one of those core things that need to be right, or else you'll have all these other problems. All these symptoms will occur as a result of not having the cause of all those symptoms correct. So that's one. The other one, another one is sort of when picking. Typically, we don't want to be, inefficient with our motions, plucking at strings and pulling the hand away. We want to more or less keep the hand and the wrist and the elbow all really still. We're not moving from the elbow as we do. Well, depends on what you're doing, I suppose, if you're sweeping or picking on a single string. But there's not the same sorts of movements happening in the forearm or the wrist when you're finger picking. Typically, that's all pretty still as you pluck the strings. So these are some of the points of difference between flat picking and finger picking. So if you're coming from the angle of flat picking and that's what you're used to, then these are some of the things that you'd want to be on top of. Another one which is important is with your fretting. In finger picking in general, it's easy to get very distracted by just the picking hand and working on the picking hand technique, and that's it. Kind of like with flat picking, if you just work on your picking hand, you still got your fretting hand to consider. And whilst we could say, well, it's doing similar things to if you're flat picking, it depends. I mean, if you're on the acoustic guitar, you want to have, use open strings and big sounds. And so I think sometimes when you're finger picking, you focus so much on the picking hand, and that can get really, really good, but it's only going to sound so good if you're just playing open chords and bar chords all the time. So there's those aspects to focus on as well when working with finger picking.
Cool, very good. So all of you electric guys who are looking to get into finger picking, pay attention. And by the way, as we are going along here, if you have questions for Simon about anything acoustic guitar related, drop them in the chat, because we'll take some questions later on. And if you got a good question, we'll give you an answer. So moving on, what about hybrid picking? So this is something I personally have zero experience with, but I had some people ask me. I've had people email me, and I usually send them to your website and your channel, because I know you have way more experience about this than I do. So again, I'm a pick style player looking to do hybrid picking. What are the tips you have for that?
Okay, so I will preface this with I'm not a huge hybrid. I do it, but if you look at some of the rockabilly guys, country players, they'll be full hybrid pickers, and it'll sound fantastic. But for me, I do it because basically I see there's three ways we can play guitar. We can use a flat pick, we can use our fingers, and we can hybrid pick. So I like to be pretty versatile and be able to use my fingers when necessary. So when you're hybrid picking, of course, you've taken a finger out of the equation because the index is needed to hold the pick with the thumb, of course. So I would just really, practice patterns that you would normally finger pick, or even pick with, just your pick if you're not finger picking at all, and just practice playing those hybrid picking. So if I'm playing up a C chord, I'm going to use my pick to play the root note, and then I might bring in the pinky here just to have an extra finger because the index is out, but you don't necessarily have to. But it's really just taking things you'd play with a flat pick and seeing if you can, use hybrid picking. So I might have, typically I do some like open string type runs where I might go Something like that. So I'll think, okay, can I do that with hybrid picking? Which you can, right? I'm basically alternating between my pick and fingers. And you can hear the sharper sort of tone with the pick. So you might make that choice because you like the sound of that. Hybrid picking is good because you can revert between finger picking and flat picking very smoothly. Because you've got the pick there at all times. Sometimes when I'm strumming, I'll use my pick and fingers because I like the sound of that more. I like the sound of my nails against the back of the strings with some of my strumming. So I'll always mix up flat pick with my fingers, basically, and that's a pure choice born from the tone that I'm getting when I do that. But basically it's just taking anything that you would normally chordal pick, or if you're a finger picker and you've never hybrid picked, what you finger pick, and just replacing what the thumb would play with the pick. And then you can build all sorts of crazy speed with it if you're into that sort of thing, or you're into the country stuff and all that type of thing. But that's pretty much the hybrid picking, and it's definitely worth getting a very basic skill with it because it's very helps you become more versatile.
Very cool. What about like thumb picking that some people use? Is that just basically an alternative to hybrid picking, or is there a more unique application to it that's different from hybrid picking?
Okay, so thumb picks. So for those who don't know, thumb pick is just a pick that's going to sit below your thumbnail. So when I first used a thumb pick, which was many years ago, I used to think you just sort of place it over the top of the fingernail like that, or the thumbnail like that, but it does need to sit down below the thumbnail. And there's all sorts of different thumb picks that you can get. But basically, for me, I mean, it's a personal choice as to whether you want to use a thumb pick or not. But for me, thumb picks, I will use a thumb pick when I'm Travis picking. And if I'm not Travis picking, typically I don't use a thumb pick at all. So let me explain what that is if you don't know what Travis picking is. So Travis picking is a way of finger picking that was born from a player many years ago, Mel Travis. And it's basically where you keep a bass happening on the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you have different bass patterns. I won't go right into the detail here, but the whole sound of Travis picking is to get that muted, sharp sounding bass. If I just use my thumb, you can hear the difference there. It's much more mellow, softer. Doesn't have the same definition as the thumb pick does. And then when you've got the thumb pick going, you want to get that bass. It's not going to quite sound the same if I... Sounds okay, but it's not, not quite the sound that you want with Travis picking. So for me, Travis picking, I'm going to use the thumb pick all the time. But if I'm playing other finger picking stuff, I don't actually like that sharper sound with the thumb mostly. So an example where thumb pick wouldn't be such a good choice, in my opinion, at least, is like if I'm doing like a walking bass sort of thing. Let's see. So if I'm doing something like this, right? I want to get that more mellow sound with my thumb when I'm doing a walking bass. And I also want to, with a walking bass, I like to sometimes put in like an upstroke with my thumb. And if I'm playing with the thumb pick and I'm doing something like that, it's too sharp, it's too defined, it doesn't sound like a walking bass. There's got to be a mellower sort of sound. So that's an example of where I would definitely use my thumb my thumb as opposed to the thumb pick. And a lot of, anything outside of Travis picking, I'm going to use my thumb to get that mellower sound.
Nice. Very, I can definitely hear the difference in the examples you said. That's very cool stuff. Now, let's zoom out a little bit and just talk about acoustic guitar versus electric guitar in general. So some of the things that are different between the two are really obvious, like the acoustic is bigger, the action is higher and stuff like that. But are there any differences that are sort of less obvious and that until you get into acoustic playing, you don't really realize? So what are some things that are harder than most people realize on acoustic? And also conversely, what are some things that most people think would be hard but are actually easier, if any? Like, do any things come to mind?
Okay, so yeah, there are obvious differences, just the size of the guitar, the tension in the strings, the space in between the strings depends on the guitar, but can be a little bit different. I think, I think when people jump on an acoustic guitar and they're not used to playing an acoustic guitar, it's going to feel different, particularly if you're just used to electric guitar. And I've seen the opposite as well. For example, I've had students before who've played acoustic guitar only played acoustic guitar. They get an electric guitar and they actually play it out of tune because they're playing it with the same amount of tension and strength needed to play an acoustic, and they push down on the notes so hard that they're pushing them out of tune. So it's a touch thing, and I think the more that you play acoustic guitar, the easier it gets. There are certainly differences in how you might approach playing something on the acoustic guitar. For example, if you're, we all know about the unplugged stuff. Everyone seems to do that, or has done so for many years now. But the unplugged scene. So you're taking an electric guitar song and you put it onto the acoustic guitar, and if you just kind of dump it on there and play it exactly as you would on electric, it's not typically going to work that well. I mean, it's going to sound like the song, but there's so much more you can kind of tap into the characteristics of the acoustic guitar, using open strings and double stops and slides and things like this, where, it kind of compensates for things that we don't have, like distortion, and there's not the same amount of sustain on an acoustic guitar. So, that can kind of, can be a bit of a hindrance if you're not used to that. But the open strings, the droning of open strings with chords and sliding to replace bending at times, because it is harder to bend on the acoustic guitar. You can certainly bend, and that's a pretty common thing to do on an acoustic guitar, depending on the styles that you play. But, depending on the setup of the guitar and the scale and so forth, there's going to be positions that you're going to struggle to bend. Like, I'm going to really struggle to bend down here at the second fret. I'm not going to get much more than a quarter step bend there. So, if I want to, do something there that's got a slide, I'm going to want to not bend, I'm going to slide, right? As opposed to bend. It's not going to be the exact same sort of phrasing of that note, but then, that's the characteristics of the acoustic guitar. One other thing that comes to mind is just the string noise. You get a lot more string noise as you move on an acoustic guitar, typically, depending on the strings you're using, but there's always going to be that element. And it's something that you want to keep in mind, but it's also a characteristic of the acoustic guitar. So you're not realistically going to be able to move around on the acoustic guitar without any string noise whatsoever. And if you listen to somebody like Tommy Emmanuel, and you really just focus on the string noise, there's actually quite a bit of string noise when he's playing, which is not a bad thing at all. But you want to minimize that perhaps to a point. So there are a couple of things that can really, sort of pop out at you when you're first starting to play an acoustic guitar versus electric.
Cool. Very cool observations there, Simon. Now, what about playing bar chords? Because that I know that sometimes people ask me about this as well. It's a very challenging aspect of playing acoustic guitar in particular. If you've got a song that has a lot of bar chords, people's thumb gets tired and the hand feels like it's going to fall off after about a minute or so. The song is 3 minutes. You really got to struggle to keep up. So what are some tips you may have for making bar chords easier to play?
Okay, yeah, bar chords. So it's much much the same. I mean, I'll go through some things now, but much the same as electric. Of course, it's going to feel a little bit harder on the acoustic, but it really is just, I find those that say, oh man, the acoustic's hard to play, are those who don't really play much acoustic guitar. So of course it's going to be hard if you pick it up once every month or once every few weeks. But with bar chords, apart from just playing them regularly on the acoustic, where can we start here? So one thing you don't want to be doing when you're playing your bar chords is squeezing the neck of the guitar. So we don't want to have equal pressure, if you like, coming from the thumb and the fingers. It really wants to be kind of somewhere around sort of 80-20 or something like that, roughly. Okay, so, but if we just sort of go and play, and on the acoustic where you think, wow, this is a bit harder to play this, bar chords, I better, push harder with my fingers, you might have a tendency to squeeze the neck. So one approach that I would suggest or recommend is playing the bar chord as best you can with no thumb on the back. So it's purely 100% coming from the fingers. And, that could be tricky, of course, and it doesn't really matter too much if you don't quite get the sound. But then you can bring the thumb to the back of the neck and control more the pressure that it's going to exert on the back of the neck of the guitar, which is not equal to what the fingers, as I was saying before, not equal to what the fingers are doing at the front on the fretboard there. So it's just starting with the fingers and then bringing in the thumb, and you find you can control how much you want that thumb. It's barely pushing in. It's just sitting on the back and weighted down on the back of the fretboard, and then you can exert a little bit of pressure on that. But you can feel it's like if the fingers push, you don't want the thumb to push. You don't want them to be one entity there. You want the fingers to be able to control how much they push in, and you want the thumb to be able to control. You don't want one to sort of make the other one push as well, if that makes sense. Keeping the finger, the index finger right up against the fret, as opposed to over here where you're more likely to get the muted notes right over the top of well, not over the top, but right up against the fret. It'll look like I'm on top of it, but I'm just right pushing up against the fret. And then it's a matter of, it does, again, what am I looking for? The endurance, I guess you could say, required to play through a song that's only using bar chords does take a little bit of practice as well. So, you can continue to play, you can play bar chords for 2-3 minutes at a time or build up to that. So you can build up the endurance.
Yeah, great tips, Simon. One thing I also say to people who ask me about this is the callus on your index finger is really, really important. Just like the callus on your fingertips for regular playing, the thicker the calluses are, the less effort it takes to push down a note. And same goes for bar chords, obviously. And so the reverse of that is it's a perishable skill. If you don't play for a while, your calluses disappear. If you don't play bar chords for a while, your bar chord callus will disappear, and it makes bar chords harder, which makes the whole thing harder. You exert more energy, you get tired more quickly, and so the thicker you can get the callus to be, the better. So that, in combination with what Simon said, is what is going to help you overcome this problem if you have it. So now let's get into the can of worms of open tunings. I know we can spend a week talking about open tunings because there's so many of them out there, but generally speaking, if I'm used to playing in just standard tuning and I want to get into any one of those alter tunings that acoustic guys like to play with, what is the best way to get into that without having my brain explode because all the notes are in different places now?
Yeah, okay, so open and altered tuning. So yeah, it's yeah. All right, so first thing is it's not that different. Obviously it's different, but it's not completely new. It's not like you've never picked up a guitar before and it's not like as soon as you tune your guitar to a different tuning, all your technique goes. You've all that's all still there. And with a lot of altered tunings, there's still a portion of the guitar that stays the same. So it's not completely different. So that's just a general comment to begin with, because I'm not I play in some altered tunings now and then. It's not a huge part of my own playing, or at this point in time. But I've certainly worked with altered tunings and open tunings, quite a few times over the years. And when I avoided it for a long time because of those reasons. I just thought, it's going to throw, it's hard enough playing this thing in standard tuning. Why am I going to change the tuning and feel like I'm starting all over again? Which I really wasn't, as I was just saying. But a way in, I mean, if you want a nice, easy sort of way, the easiest pathway, let's say, into open tunings is just start by dropping the D, dropping the E down to a D, low D. And, that way you just introduce one string. I mean, I'm sure we all know that's a common tuning in itself. It's not an open tuning, but it is an altered tuning. You're altering one of the strings. And so you drop that down to a D and you get used to playing, a few things using the low D. So I do have a guitar here. This is in Dadgad, which I'll explain in a moment. But there's a low D there. Okay, so as soon as you drop to a low D, if you're playing power chords, now your power chords are going to be in a single fret. So that's one thing to, realize. And it's these little things. You've got to kind of live in the tuning. So if you've got multiple guitars and you want to get used to a particular open tuning, tune one to that open tuning and leave it in that open tuning and live in that open tuning for, a while, and become familiar with it. So we've got a low D here. You could then next drop the top E string to a low D as well. Well, it's a high D compared to the low D, but we drop it down. And you can get used to playing. Now you've got, strings 5, 4, 3, 2 haven't changed. So this is Dadgad. It's not just two low Ds here, but you could play open chords and get some nice, the ring of the open D on the top of the open chord would be really nice. If we were doing that over a C chord, it would add like an add 9 or I think. You'd have the D chord with the D on top, so an extra root note there, and it's the ringing out of the open D strings that you don't normally hear in standard tuning that will start to bring that characteristic of open tunings. And then from there, if we look at some of the common open tunings like Dadgad, open D, open G, those three tunings, if you write down what the open strings are, they're quite similar. There's commonalities between them. They've all got low and high D strings. So, if you're playing in any of those tunings, each tuning is not going to be all that different to the other. Even open D in Dadgad, the only difference is the G. It's a G in Dadgad, it's a F sharp in the open D tuning. So Dadgad is because of our strings, D, A, D, G, A, D. So you get that nice sort of D suspended sound there is what you're getting with that open tuning. But it's easing your way in. I mean, you don't have to do a string at a time. You can just jump straight in with a particular tuning. But if you're going to do Dadgad one day and then next session I'll do open G, now I'll do open D, that's not going to be so good because you're not going to settle in any one tuning. If you get really comfortable in one of them or comfortable enough in one of them, then when you look at the next one, you'll be able to use kind of the previous one as a reference point for, the next tuning. There's tons of open tuning. So if you really get into it, you can pretty much make up your own open tunings if you want, or altered tunings. You can do more or less anything. But there are a few things. And then when you're sitting in that open tuning, you start to discover things about it. For example, in Dadgad, we've got, if I play my 6th and 4th strings together, that'll be an octave. And if I play my 5th and 2nd strings together, that's an octave now because they're both A's. And if I play my D4 and D on top, there's octaves. So I can see how the octaves work out, how they work out in Dadgad. Or if I want to play 5ths, 1st and 3rd, or 2nd and 4th, and you can can just kind of play around moving that fifth shape and bringing in the open strings. Open tuning set it up for it to be easier for you to play. Standard tunings, if you strum the strings, it's going to create a chord, but it's not going to be a straight up sort of chord. This sets it up to be easier. I could even just play like a D, let's say major scale on the top string. And if I just pick any of the open strings with any of the notes of the scale, it's all going to sound good. Can't go wrong. Right? All these notes are going to be part of the key, and you're going to get that nice drone of the root on the bottom there. Okay, so you start to discover the characteristics of the tuning, and learning tunings or songs that are in DAGAD or Open G or whatever it is that you're going to explore is well worth it too, because that gives you a lot of insights.
Yeah, great stuff, Simon. And I would say that the more you are familiar with music theory, visualization of the fretboard, and the better your ear is, the easier it is to get used to any tuning. And I like what you said about living in that tuning for a while, because if you just spend more time with it, like you said, your technique doesn't change. So that part is always working for you. And if you've got an understanding of how things are generally laid out in the fretboard, like the intervals of a scale, how major, minor, seventh chords are built and so on, it's not that hard to start seeing patterns. And then from doing this for a while, you start to get really familiar and quick with those patterns. But if you rely on, like, for lack of a better word, shortcuts like the cage system, for example, where it's all like the C shape, the A shape, the G shape. I mean, when you change to the DADGAD tuning or whatever, those shapes don't exist anymore. So then you're going to run into trouble. But if you understand how music really works, like in terms of how musicians communicate, how chords are formed and so on, then it's easier. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Now, I saw a question in the chat about the use of a capo. So it might be a good time to bring that up as well. So we talked about bar chords. And what are your thoughts, Simon, on using capos? Do you think they're like cheating, or do they have a place? Like, what are your thoughts on that stuff?
Yes, definitely not cheating. That's a really ignorant view. Anytime I hear that, I laugh. I can kind of see where it comes from, because it's like, I don't have to play, bar chords because I can use a capo and capo somewhere and to suit the key, and away we go. But the capo, I use it a lot because it allows me to play open chords up and down the fretboard in different positions. And I don't do that to avoid bar chords. I do it because open chords have a different quality about them and different possibilities than bar chords. So if I am playing something or arranging something in, let's say, I'm in the key of B flat. And so typically, if I'm in the key of B flat, I'm probably going to have a B flat chord, an E flat, an F, and G sharp minor, C minor, chords that are diatonic to B flat. And as you can see, I can't play any of these as open chords, right? They're really only going to be possible to play as bar chords. Now that's fine if I want to, play bar chords and strum away and so forth, then I can do that. But if I want to get a nice open string sound, I want some nice embellishments, and I want nice sustain and all this sort of stuff, then that's where the capo is going to become very handy. And there's a number of options as to where I could capo for that, and I would kind of play around and see what sort of suits me best. But it's a stylistic, creative thing that's driving that choice to use the capo. I'm not thinking I can't play my bar chords, they're too hard, I'll just use a capo and never work on my bar chords. If I capo for that key at the first fret, then I could use my A, my E, and my D will give me the E flat there. And then of course you can get all those embellishments and extensions in there. And if I want to, perhaps try at the 3rd fret, I could get the same chords with a G, C, D, G. And maybe I want to use these chords over the A chords because I like the embellishment opportunities on that I get with G, C, and D. Every open chord is unique in the shape, so it's unique in the kind of extensions and embellishments that you can get. So these are things that drive the choices. So, you know, there's a couple of other positions you could capo for D flat as well. But it's the thing is, it's you know, it's a choice that comes from, you know, how can I arrange this thing? I mean, there's so many great songs that use capos, and if you know, took the capo out of play, then there'd be a lot of songs you'd never ever heard of. So yeah, definitely not cheating. Not a bad thing to use if you are just starting to play guitar and are at the point of bar chords. It's fine to use the capo to kind of be able to do something earlier, but it's certainly not a thing to avoid bar chords. It's a thing to be able to, you know, be more creative and have more ways to arrange something on the guitar.
Cool. Very good stuff. Now, what about this percussive style that some guitar players use? I know there's one guy in particular, Andy McKee, is a really popular guy on YouTube. He does a lot of that percussive stuff, and I'm sure other players too. So when I say percussive, I mean like slapping the guitar while you're playing chords and melodies and so on. So what are some tips you have for that, for getting started with that?
Okay, so again, not a huge part of my style, but certainly something I've explored. And in terms of getting started, yeah, so basically you want to have ways to emulate the various parts of the drum kit on the body of the guitar. So I would start with some very basic elements to that. One being like a bass drum sound or a kick drum, which you can get using the heel of your hand, the palm of your hand there, on the sort of soundboard of the guitar down here. And so that's giving you like a kick drum sound. You can get like a tom sort of sound, I guess. It doesn't, I mean, you're creating percussive sounds, so you don't necessarily have to draw the parallels with the kit with every sound you make, but you can use the side of your thumb to slap down onto the similar area of the guitar. And if you want to get a snare type sound, rim shot sound, then some players will use different combinations here. I tend to use my pinky and my ring finger, and you have them together, pinky and ring in this case. You might use your second and third fingers, and you hit the side of the guitar roughly sort of around about there where your hand's naturally going to be when you're playing this stuff. And you're after that sort of pop-in type sound. You don't want to get this sort of sound. You want to try and get that pop-in sound, which you get by hitting, when you hit the side of the body of the guitar, you want to hit sort of with the base of the fingers aligned more or less with the rim of the guitar there. You don't want to sort of hit on the tip of the fingers here. You want to get the bulk of the little fingers hitting down onto the side of the guitar there. So you've got like a bass drum, you've got your thumb to bring in a bit of a tom sound, and you've got this snare sound. So you can create little beats with that, maybe it's a typical sort of rock beat. And this hand can come into play. This hand can, sometimes you'll see this kind of like a snare, not a snare, a hi-hat sound. This type of thing. There's other parts to percussive playing, like string slapping. So slapping the thumb down onto the string to sound the note as opposed to plucking it, so you get more of a percussive element to it. And you can start to get some basic beats, and then you can start to bringing that into all these sorts of things, you can start to combine the two together. So even just some basic techniques there, you can, go quite a way with those. And if you want to get right into that playing, then yeah, certainly players like Andy McKee and the like are really good to look at. Sometimes I see some percussive playing. This wouldn't be Andy McKee or a player like that, but you see a lot of it. It's very, very popular. And what you want to be really careful of is that there's a little thing called melody that still exists. And sometimes you see people percussively playing and they get so involved in all the percussion that you just lose the sense of the tune or whatever it is they're doing. It gets too heavy on, I've got to make sure all this is percussive, and so it's something to bring into your playing if it's something that appeals to you, but to remember that you still want the guitar to be playing melodic things also.
Yeah, great stuff. Now we have a question here from Sebastian Giraldo. Hopefully I'm saying that right. So he asked about legato on acoustic guitar, so hammer-ons, pull-offs, and slides. So obviously it's much harder to do that on acoustic than electric, but how much, if any, of it do you do, and what are your thoughts or approaches for practicing it for acoustic?
Okay, so it wouldn't really differ from how you would practice it on electric, as far as I would think. But again, it might feel a little bit trickier to do on acoustic guitar. If we've got the pentatonic scale, I mean, all the same principles apply. You want to make sure that you're hammering down on this note from above, and you're hammering down on the fingertips as you move up the scale. One thing I've done with students quite a bit when they're working with hammer-ons and pull-offs and legato is typically people tend to pick the string and perform the move, the pull-off or the hammer-on, or the combination of, at the same time as picking the string, whereas we really want to pick sound the note and then hammer on the next note. So I get students to practice just isolate the legato, meaning I'll have if I'm going to be doing some sort of combination here or just a hammer on here, I'm going to have my finger down where it would be to pluck the note, but I won't pluck the note. I'll just hammer down with the finger. So I'm purely getting the sound from the hammer on. It's not from the pick beforehand. You want to be able to sound the note with the hammer on without from nowhere, basically. And you can work your way up. Same with the pull-off. So you'd have this finger ready and you'd get the note in front that you're going to pull down, and you want to make sure that you're pulling down off of the string there. A lot of the time people will, for pull-offs, will just lift the finger, and you don't really hear, as you can hear, you don't really hear that string or that note so well. But when we pull down and the finger is effectively plucking the string there, and it's just totally isolating the legato move. And that's just the very basics with legato, but as far as being on acoustic guitar, it's not really going to be that different, other than it might be a little bit more challenging. So again, if you do a whole lot of legato on an electric guitar and then you jump on an acoustic for 5 minutes, don't expect it's necessarily going to feel the same. From there, to build the strength, you can sit and just trill notes and build endurance. So rather than necessarily trying to go really, really quick, go at a moderate pace, but go for a long time. See if you can do that for a minute without stopping, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. You'll find you can build that up pretty quickly once you've got it going. I don't think there's really all that much difference in how you might practice it. It's just going to take a little more time perhaps to get the sound, but really I think that it's in the technique. So if you've got the technique, I don't think it would take all that much to come over onto acoustic and be able to do the same sorts of things.
Yeah, I agree. And just to add to some who are probably wondering but are afraid to ask, is practicing legato and acoustic going to help your electric playing? I can answer that part. Yes, it will. Because of everything you said, Simon, it is challenging. It's harder for all the obvious reasons. So it is going to make your acoustic, make your electric playing, legato playing better and faster, but do not just practice acoustic for the sake of it benefiting your electric playing. It's going to be a side benefit, but I don't think it's a good idea to spend 3 months only practicing acoustic if all you want to do is make your electric legato faster. So just wanted to throw that out there because I can imagine some people watching this having this question, so I wanted to address that as well. All right, now Simon, you have an ebook about acoustic rhythm guitar. So I'm gonna come back to you. Then I'm gonna put the slide up here in a second later. Do you want to talk about what's in this ebook and what it's about?
Sure. So basically, the idea with this ebook is it's taking one chord progression, very common chord progression from memory. I think it's a 1, 5, 6, 4 chord progression. Whatever it is, it's very, very common. I'm quite sure it's that. And basically, the ebook goes through different ways that you could approach playing this chord progression on guitar, acoustic, but there'd be things there that would certainly relate to electric as well. So basically, we take this chord progression and we look at different ways that we can play it. So the capo comes into it for the purposes of what I was talking about before, using embellishments and extensions to decorate the progression to make it sound cool and a little bit different. Also using rhythm fills to punctuate the space between the chords is another approach. That's kind of in the style of like the rhythm playing of someone like Jimi Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan or these days John Mayer. Also looking at droning strings. I'm very big on droning strings, open strings with chords and using little triad shapes and a little bit of finger picking in there, but you could replace that with flat picking if you wanted. It's the general principles, not the exact example that's going to be valuable here. Harmonic slaps, getting some nice harmonics going with the chord progression. A jazz, how can we approach it from a jazzy point of view? So the whole premise of the book is to how can we take a chord progression and dress it up to make it sound cool, and the different ways that you can do that. So that is available at the link there that you see on the screen now, and it's a free download. Just pop in your details and you'll get that immediately via email. So that is something that you might find very useful for your guitar playing.
Yes, and I also put a link to this ebook in the description of this live stream. So if you want to just click on that and download it, I think you should. Simon's stuff is really, really good. And I also got something for you guys, which is a video masterclass on how to build guitar speed. So it's a little bit more in the same vein as the content of my general channel. It's about electric guitar playing, and it's about how to build guitar speed without having to practice slow and work the speed up gradually in small increments, because that is not the best approach to take in many cases. If you want to know another way to build speed, check it out at the link on the screen right now. That's also totally free, and the link to that will also be in the description of this video. All right, so Simon, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom and tips about acoustic playing. I actually picked up some stuff along the way. I got an acoustic guitar in the other room. Maybe I'll practice after this is over and apply some of these things. So I think I'll try the altered tuning ones, because that's a lot of fun. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So great having you, Simon. Thanks for sharing. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Simon,
Thank you, Mike.
Any final words about what we talked about?
Sorry, I've missed that.
Do you have any final words before we close this out?
I would just say, if you're interested in acoustic guitar, make it part of your plan. It doesn't have to dominate. You want to play it regularly, but regularly might be half a dozen times over a week or two. It comes into your playing, and look into finger picking, and obviously I've got my website there if you want to check that out for different resources all to do with acoustic guitar. And Mike, thank you for having me here. It's a privilege to be on your channel, and I really appreciate your time in doing this live stream today.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a great weekend. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.